Good morning, everyone. Good morning again, everyone. Seems as though every time I begin to talk about a subject such as the one that we're going to talk about today, vision and visions. You know, sometimes the electrical energy, the currency in this room, the magnetism in this room just gets a little bit interesting. And I think that's exactly what happened today. So we're going to start this all over again and wish everybody a very good morning. If you would like to join me in the chat room is now open. So please do come on in and join me in the chat room. It'll be great to have you with me. And this morning, again, on Exploring Sacred, we're talking about visions. We're talking about vision. That's one of the things a lot of people ask me about with regarding myself is to see for them. And what am I seeing and how am I seeing it? And I know a lot of us actually have times in our lives where we experience visions. And I'd like your input on that so we can have a really good discussion about it. I'm just posting the new chat room on my Exploring Sacred page. And for those of you that hung in there with me for a minute while my computer was doing whatever it was my computer was doing there for a short time, thank you for hanging in there. And we are back live. This past week, I found myself in the Badlands of South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation with my relatives to celebrate the life of my Hunka brother, my Tiblo. And in the middle of all of the ceremonies that were going on around Guy Dolknife's passing and his burial ceremonies, one of the elder ladies walked up to me and she said, "Denise, do you have a moment for my granddaughter to speak to you? She has a question for you." And I said, well, yeah, you know, it was a break in the action. And I said, I'd be happy to speak with her. So she brought her granddaughter over to me. She's a university student up there in Fargo, North Dakota. And she wanted me to see something for her. She was experiencing a feeling that someone was watching her, was looking at her in her college apartment. And it was unsettling because not only was there a feeling of something looking at her, but this something was also moving things around in her apartment. And so they asked me to see for them. Oftentimes I'm asked to see for somebody, depending on what it is or how it is they interpret this ability that I've been given in this lifetime, that many of you have been given in this lifetime, and that is to see into the non-physical realms, to seeing into the spirit realms. Some people call it being a seer. Some people call it being a medium. Some people call it being a psychic. Some people call it being a sensitive. I typically call it being a seer or a sensitive. I'm not really fond of the word psychic because it has so many B-rated movie connotations around that word. The same for the word medium. I really don't care for that word either, only because it's been so Hollywoodized, just as being a psychic has, and not always in good ways. So I kind of tend to go towards labeling myself, if there has to be one, as a seer, as a sensitive. And that's also the way that my spiritual director, my Dominican spiritual director, has tagged me, as a seer, as a sensitive. And because really that is the connotation, that's really the meat and the bones of all of it, meat and potatoes of all of it, is the fact that it's simply being sensitive to the non-physical realms. Being sensitive to what most others can't see, what others can't feel, can't hear, can't sense in this lifetime. Good morning, Katie Battle. Hey, Danielle. Thank you for hanging in there with me as we got everything back up and running in the studio. Good morning, Angie. It's great to have you in the house as well. Katie is saying, I was thinking it was my goofy phone. No, that would be me right here. So I've got some sweetgrass running here in my office space, in my studio. Keep the airwaves clear and clean as we're talking about vision and visions. And for those of you in the chat room, if you want to share about maybe a vision that you've had or that you've questioned, or one that was absolutely spot on and accurate, please do go ahead and chat it up there in the chat room. I'd like to have a really good discussion about this morning. Visions, some people think, are an extrasensory perception of the physical eyeballs. And that may be true, but I've always perceived it as being an extrasensory perception of my third eye, my ajna, that energy center that we feel is located in the center of our forehead, right smack dab right there, like the Cyclops. And it's that third eye, that energy center that feeds the pineal gland information from the subtle realms. And I believe that there are people who were born having visions, and that vision very well developed. I'm one of those people. Hey, Donna King. My cousin Donna is in the house. And there are those people who have spontaneous visions, ecstatic visions. For as long as I can remember, I have had visions. And what do they look like? Well, sometimes the visions happen inside the head, right? We have these visions that go on inside what I call my inner screen. It's almost as though there's a movie playing on top of everything else that the physical eyes are seeing or perceiving. And if we close our eyes, then what we see physically is gone, but that inner screen movie continues to roll along. And it plays out. And where does that come from? If you've ever had that and you wonder, why am I having this scene rolling around in my mind? Sometimes those scenes can look like visions of things that have happened in the past, a stroll down memory lane. And we think, well, we're just conjuring up a memory. And maybe you are, or perhaps someone on the other side is sharing a memory with you. Oftentimes when we're having a vision, and it's because someone that we love who has crossed over, or perhaps one of our guardian angels, guides, or allies, is sharing a message, a memory with intent, there's often some real emotion that comes with the vision that we're having there on the inner screen. We can feel it. It brings up the past, all of the emotions, good, bad, and different with it. And sometimes people want to erase that away quickly. I don't have time for this daydreaming, we may call it. And I would say if you are in a space to fully be present with the vision, allow yourself the space to be present with it. Perhaps there's something in that memory, in that recollection, that needs to be brought up in the present moment for healing, for recognition, for maybe an aha moment. I often find myself strolling down memory lane with visions, and as I've gotten older, I've come to understand that my visions, as I held them in my childhood, take on a new meaning in my adulthood. So things that we experienced as children look differently when we look at them from the space of a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, a 50-year-old, a 60-year-old, a 70-year-old. So sometimes memories are brought back to us by the means of, we might call them daydreams, we might call them visions. Because perhaps now at an older age, we can take the information that we've stuffed in our heart, mind, body, and soul as a tender child to take a look at it again. From an adult's perspective, an adult with a few miles on the odometer and some experiences that have become our wisdom. We can look back at that time and think to ourselves, perhaps now I see the purpose of why I passed through that. Perhaps now I can understand how that helped to serve to make me a stronger woman, a more compassionate woman, a wise woman. If you're having those visions at this time of the year, that's highly likely because this is the time of the year when the shadow is longer. and daylight is shorter. It's also the time that we understand as the holy days. We're beginning the process of entering into the holy days all around the world. There are people from many cultures and customs, religious pathways, spiritual pathways that begin to celebrate holy times. Many of them revolving around the return of the sun at winter solstice and prepping up for the return of the sun. Many of them have no association with that whatsoever, but they are holy based on that religious pathway, the prophets, the saints, the teachings of. And because we all inhabit this grandmother earth together, I believe we are all related by soul, by stardust. We sometimes can feel, share, and see the visions of others. We come together at this time of the year. And particularly with the advent of the computer age, the cyber age, we are privy to many other cultures and customs. And if we are already sensitive, what we see and immerse ourselves in, even in the cyber world, can become part of our psyche, can become part of our experience as sensitives and seers. But on a personal note at this time of the year, this is the time of memories. Remember when. Remember that Thanksgiving when. Remember trick-or-treating when. Remember Christmas when. And in those times of remember when those come up within our heart, within our mind, and in conversation with friends or family, oftentimes it ignites a visions. And oftentimes those visions do come with emotions, and here in the West particularly, we're not really fond, many of us, of our emotions. Perhaps we've been taught that we shouldn't cry, that we shouldn't emote, that we shouldn't display any form of emotion. And so we're uncomfortable with the emotions that come up with memories, with thoughts, with feelings. And so I ask you, maybe this time, this season, as we're entering into the holy days, you allow those visions to pass through, not to get stuck in them, but to bear witness to them from who you are now, based on the wisdom that you've gained in your life, based on your experiences of being a spiritual being, having a human experience. And if you need help sorting through those feelings and emotions, to reach out for help. Call Terry Ruel, call Nicole Fix, call your favorite therapist, rabbi, minister, whomever, spiritual healer, shaman, to help work through and heal those times. That pineal gland that sits right there in the middle of our brain, covered in crystals as it is, it gives and it receives information, and it gives information out into the ethers, out into the universe, out into our data bank of memories at this time of the year. And as it gives information out, as we are remembering, pondering, positing, what about the future? Where do I go now? We begin to think about those things now. Sends out a signal, and that signal for many of us brings a signal back. It's magnetic, giving us feelings, thoughts, knowings, perceptions, visions, apparitions, visitations. It's really quite magical. Good morning, Corey. Good to see you in the house. Katie is saying that her anxiety has been very high. Well, this is an anxious time of the year for many, because we're starting to think about, oh, do we really have to go to Thanksgiving dinner with that person? Do they have to be there? Do I have to sit next to them? Am I going to have to talk to them? And oh my goodness, then what about Christmas Eve? And what about Christmas? What about Hanukkah? What about Diwali? What about? We become anxious because we have to spend time with people, their thoughts, their memories, their ghosts of Christmas past, their ghosts of Christmas present, and their specters of Christmas is yet to come. And so when we gather together as family and friends, we're not only gathering with the physicality of the people that we gather with, but we're also gathering with their visions, their ghosts, their apparitions, their memories, their experiences, and their emotions tied into those experiences, those memories. And we find ourselves in a soup of emotions, thoughts, and feelings. Pardon me. And what do we do about that? Well, we have choices to make. We can set up really good, healthy boundaries and decide we're not going there, even though it's the protocol and has been the protocol to be somewhere. We can say no this year, or we can go, and we can go prepared, understanding that everybody is having a human experience. And with that, having a human experience it's an experience, it's an adventure, not always a kind adventure, but it can be a hilarious adventure, depending on how we look at it. It's also the time where visions happen while we're asleep. Hey, Holly. Hi, Marianne. Pardon my allergies, everybody. Oh, my goodness. I'm telling you, this time of the year really kicks them up. When the wood fire starts in here at the house, all of a sudden the allergies say hello. It's winter, even though it's not really winter. It's only supposed to be autumn. What about our nighttime? Those night dreams and the visions that we have. It's really usually when we're the most relaxed that the visions come to us. Sometimes, as I said, they play on our inner screen and we think we're daydreaming. There we go, thinking about that again. We're conjuring up visions, conjuring up images, memories. Some of them are joyful, magnificent. And sometimes the memory lane is actually somebody from the other side wishing to stroll down memory lane or wishing to have you perhaps take another look. But what about those visions that happen outside of our physical body? For those of you that are listening in right now or in the archive, and you're thinking, yeah, I've been having these visions since I was a child, or my child is now having these visions, and what are they? Well, they are extra senses being ignited, being utilized. We are, after all, sensitive beings. Some of us are just more sensitive than others. Good morning, Marianne. It's good to see you in the house. Animals have extra senses. Speaking of Marianne, boy, my dog Gabriel, my little boy Gabriel James, he is really quite the psychic, and so is my cat Dominic Antonio, and so are my horses. They're all very, very sensitive. My horses especially so. Hey, Lady Hawk. Chetan Wee, it's good to have you in the house this morning. And I know that all of my animals, all of my four-legged babies, have this amazing ability to have visions. They see things. They see the visions that I share with them. When I leave the house, Gabriel becomes really anxious. My little fluff ball. He becomes really anxious, and so I vision for him. What do I vision for him? I hold in my mind the vision of me coming home. And that big old grin on his face. Gabriel has this talent for being able to smile. And it started out as he would lift half of his lip up and you could see half of his chiclets, right, coming at you with a big old smile. And now in his older age, he just turned 12 on Halloween. When I come in the house and he runs from wherever he's been, he has a full-on smile. Corey, you've seen the smile. You've been here in my house. You see the smile. It's a big old smile. And so I hold that vision of me coming in the house, calling his name, and him running toward me with that big old smile. And I hold that vision in my mind until I can feel that he's picked up on it. And I know he's picked up on it when he finally sits down on his hind legs and he feels relaxed to me. He's caught the vision. I do this with my horses as well when I need them to come to me, or we're going to be doing something, their feet or their teeth or something like that. I hold the vision. This is very similar to the way in which those on the other side, guides, allies, those we love, get our attention. It's with a vision. So if you can imagine that you do this with your critters at home, this is often how it happens in the world of spirit. Someone that we love has crossed over. They're holding a vision for us, hoping that we catch that vision, right? That feeling, that thought. And then there are those times when we actually see a vision of them standing before us. How do they do that? Well, it's all energy. It's the coagulation of amazing etheric energy. Everything in the universe is energetic. We know that. Everything is magnetic. We know that. And so for those of us with the ability to see or to feel, we can pick up on the energy coagulating in a room, whether we're in a home that has a haunting in it, or if we have our own vision of someone being present. Hey, Julie. I love this idea, she says. Thanks for the reminder. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, that idea of holding that vision. And sometimes the vision comes alive. And for myself, and I know for some of you, perhaps you've always been having visions. And have I lost you? I hope you haven't lost me, Donna. You just found me. I hope you haven't lost me. Come back in, cousin. Are you in Jamaica? Are you in Jamaica? Are you back in Rome? Cousin Donna's a flight attendant, so we never know around the world where she might be. Let me know when you're back in. Having visions of someone or something, somebody who has crossed over, is so commonplace for some people that they don't even realize that it isn't common. When someone says, I have these daydreams all the time, and in the daydreams I have, somebody who comes to me, and they kind of speak to me, they give me thoughts, they give me feelings, and doesn't everybody have that, Denise? Well, the answer to that is no. It isn't common. What's more uncommon is the ability to see spirit outside of your inner screen, which is the way that I typically perceive spirit, both on the inner screen and the outer screen. In other words, if I'm in a crowd of people or even in a small grouping of people, there are those that are physically present in their body, and there are those that are not in their physical body, but energetically, spiritually, in their spiritual body, their soul body, they are very present. They're very much there. They look slightly different than those that are in their physical body, and we all perceive that differently. So my way is not the absolute right way. I want to say that right off of the get-go. The way that I see, the way that I perceive is not the only way. Your daydreaming visions may be different, slightly, or very different. They are based on your ability to perceive. If you are having visions that are upsetting, daydreams that are upsetting, you can ask whoever it is that is upsetting you in your daydreams to stop. If it is a common daydream over and again that is violent, that is malfeasant, you can request it to stop. You can demand it to stop. I don't wish to see this anymore. I have a lot of people who are prone to being sensitive, clear feeling, clairsentient people who are also visionaries that are given information from the etheric realms about things that are going to happen that are not very pleasant. Precognitions can also come in visions. The visions that appear as daydreams and the visions that literally appear to be happening right in front of you. If you don't wish to receive those types of communications, you can say to your own higher self, your guardian angels and your guides, I no longer wish to see those. I no longer wish to be somebody who sees what it is that's going to happen, and I cannot change those things that are going to happen, so I do not wish to see them. That easy. If they persist, call me. Right? We can set up an appointment. But sometimes we're so sensitive, we can pick up on information that is on the timeline continuum of things that we say are yet to happen. And yet in the scope of time, all time I believe is now. In quantum physics, all time can present itself as now. And we pick up on things that have not yet physically happened, but are in the works and are already in the Akasha. And if you are somebody who experiences precognition and precognitive visions, and they are disconcerting to you and you wish to no longer experience them, can ask your guardian angel. We all have one of those. Angels come by different names, by the way. Shining ones, angels, right? Beings of light. We have many names for those beings that accompany us from the realms of the heavenly realms, the spiritual realms, to help us through this human experience. Whatever you call them, tell them, I no longer wish to receive those. So as my spiritual bouncer, my spiritual guardian, if you could help block those from my sensitivities, that would be a good thing. You are in control of your abilities for the most part. If you are continuously being visited by somebody who is disconcerting to you, you have a vision, an apparition of somebody that scares you, maybe it's human, maybe it isn't human. Again, you are not welcome here. You are not allowed here if it is scaring you. If it is not scaring you, and Katie is sharing that her mom came to her in a dream last week. Both of them apparently are fans of Brooks and Dunn, the country singers, Brooks and Dunn. And that was probably a good thing. Maybe had some emotion attached to it. Some people, when they have a vision for the first time, a spontaneous vision, maybe mom has never come in a dream or in a vision or a daydream, it can be disconcerting and off-putting at first. And I've had many, many people say, Dana, I wish I would have not been so scared. Because some people will have the vision for the very first time of someone that they love who has gone home, and it scares them. And they say, I don't ever want to have that again. Go away, you're scaring me. And they go away. They honor that request. And so many people, countless people have said to me, I wish I never would have said that. Now that I understand that having a vision or having vision, a sixth sense, a third eye wide open, is a gift, a talent, an ability. Call it what you might. I wish now that I wouldn't have sent mom or grandpa or auntie packing. Is there a way to bring those visions back? And there is. There are exercises, there are classes that I teach regarding exercising your third eye. I call it the Seers series. There are ways of bringing that back, but by golly, when you tell your higher self, your spiritual body, you no longer wish to have those visions, everyone pays attention to that. And most often, not always, it goes away. And then later in life, I hear from people, I'd like to have it back. There was no one there when I was a child or a young person to teach me that it was okay, that it's perfectly natural to have vision and visions. It's okay to be a seer. It's okay to be a sensitive. When an apparition happens, a physical apparition, I think I'll probably do next week's show on apparitions and visitations like that. But when those things happen, if you are able, I ask you to just be with it for a minute. To put aside any religious training that you may have had that says having visions is only for the priest or the rabbi or for the prophet of the church. Only ordained people can have vision and visions. Everyone else, right, is having an encounter with something malfeasant because they are not ordained. That is a bunch of baloney. That is a bunch of baloney. Becoming ordained is not the only way to have vision or visions. It just so happens that some people who are also ordained have the ability to have vision and visions. There are many people who are not ordained who have vision and visions, who have been told that it's not right, it is not good, it is not of God. I happen to believe that everything is of God. Right? If God created everything, if a creator created everything, then creator created everything. Everything. Including you, including me. But I'm not worthy to have visions, Denise. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. But I was taught that it was evil. Well, then you were taught through ignorance. There's a lot of ignorance around vision and visions. Ignorance number one, or misunderstanding number one, is that it's only for the ordained. That's a falsehood. That is a falsehood. There are many people, again, who are ordained who also have vision. But not all people who have vision are ordained in the way that we often define ordained. There are many people that have a gift or a talent that happens to be spiritual and yet very misunderstood because it isn't concrete. Often concrete evidence is when the proof ends up in the pudding. It plays out. You know, people will question my ability to see, and then what will happen is that they'll say, oh my God, that thing that you saw, well, that was spot on. It happened just that way. Or you described that person perfectly. Or, you know, when you said that, Denise, it made no sense at all. And I thought, she doesn't even know what she's talking about. And 2 weeks later or a month later, oh my goodness, there it was. There it was. Vision isn't always instantaneous in that the proof is not always immediately in the pudding, right? Sometimes it's a little bit down the road on the time continuum, or somebody might have to dive into their memory banks to remember, or go through a photograph album to see. Holly is saying, I saw how my friend's husband is going to pass in the near future, and I'm trying to keep it in perspective so I can still be around them without being distracted by it. Wondering if I saw it so I can be prepared to help her through it. Yes, that does happen. Sometimes we do have information that is given to us. And we hold that vision because, you know, the husband has a path, and that path may change. Perhaps on the trajectory he is currently walking, that may be the outcome. And if that is the outcome, if that is the trajectory, Holly, then you keep it to yourself and you just prepare yourself. And we as seers understand that this beingness of free will, we have so many choices, we have so many so many choices in life and in death, I believe anyway, in this human existence, that can also change for him. And being privy to that information, then you're also privy to the fact that somewhere something different happened. A different choice was made. A different avenue was walked. And so the outcome was different. I learned a long time ago that it's very disconcerting for some people to know that I have vision, because there are times when things are seen. And like you, I hold that because I understand we all have a myriad of choices, a myriad of outcomes. And perhaps I'm just seeing one outcome. One outcome. Maybe I'm seeing the outcome. And so I hold it sacred. I don't go through the grocery store or the shopping mall or any other place dispensing with what it is that I see for other people. Long time ago, Sister Irene Mary, I talk about Irene Mary a lot because she is my mentor and she is my teacher, and she's the one that a long time ago, 20 years ago? Oh my goodness, more than 20 years ago. Wow, almost 30 years ago now. Said to me, Denise, this talent or this gift that you've been given, this charismatic gift that you've been given, is sacred. It's not a toy. It's not a sideshow. But it's sacred because we're dealing with, when we're utilizing the gift on behalf of others, we're dealing with their soul. We're dealing with their spiritual being. We're dealing with their psyche, their heart, their love, their mind. And I always think about that every single time I am with somebody. I've got, right after this show, my day begins with clients. Whatever they happen to be calling for, I'm very mindful, as is Holly, that we're talking about somebody's soul, somebody's heart, their life. And I'm so glad that all those years ago, those decades ago, Sister Irene spoke to me about it. Not everybody understands what it is that walks and dances around them. Years ago, I had a man call me who was just toying with me. And he asked me what I saw around him, because he had somebody who died, who was murdered. It was a woman who was murdered. And he was very expressive in the murder. Well, I did see this woman around him very clearly. It was a TV show thing that I was doing back in the day. And I saw this woman very clearly around him, and I explained this to him. Well, a couple of weeks later, I got this note in the mail saying that this man did not really have a person in his life that died that way. So how could I possibly have seen what it was that I saw? And I called Sister Irene Mary and I said, Irene, I know that I saw this woman around that man. And now he's telling me that he was just testing me and that he didn't really have that person personally in his life. And she said, well, what you saw was very real and you need to investigate further. So I called this man. I called him because I knew that what I saw was real. And I needed, for my own edification, for my own understanding, to understand why I saw what I did. And it was one of the greatest teachings that I ever learned in that moment. I called him and I said, I'm really concerned about in our interaction. And to his credit, he gave me his phone number. And as I was talking to him, it became very apparent in my inner screen, on my inner screen, that this was a man that really enjoyed hanging out at cemeteries. And I asked him about it. I said, "Do you enjoy being in cemeteries?" And he said, "I do." I said, "Is there a particular cemetery and a particular part of that cemetery that you enjoy?" He said, "I walk through that cemetery every day. And yeah, there are a couple of headstones and there are a couple of spots in the cemetery that I'm really drawn to, Denise." And I said to him, "One of those headstones or one of those spots in the cemetery, does it belong to the woman that you described and I saw?" And he went silent. I said, "Because if it does, somebody is walking with you, and it's somebody that you picked up in the cemetery." And he cleared his throat, and he said, "Oh my God, Denise. Yes." There goes Gabriel. The answer to your question is yes. I never thought about the fact that just because this woman wasn't personally involved in my life, but I walk by her headstone nearly every day of my life, that she might actually now be walking with me. Well, we had a wonderful conversation after that about the fact that we need to be mindful of where we're walking, what we're enamored with, of after going to a place like a funeral or a cemetery, that we might want to do some nice spiritual hygiene for ourselves, right? He and I had a wonderful conversation, and I learned a whole lot that day, and so did he. And I called Sister Irene Mary back, and I said, "Sister, this is how the rest of that vision played out." And she said, "Isn't it wonderful having a conversation, an open conversation, and now you've learned something and he has learned something. And perhaps that woman who was murdered that he walks by every day was a teacher for both of you." She said, "We might not ever know, but you might want to give a prayer for her and some thanks." That was a moment when I really began to learn to fully trust what it is that I see, and also understand that sometimes there's a whole lot of misunderstanding or ignorance around the fact that we are always walking in a soup of spirit. Always, whether we believe it or not, whether we feel it or see it or not. When we have pleasant visions, that's a good, wonderful thing. And we give thanks for that. Thank you for that. When we have visions that take us down memory lane, a stroll with our own personal history, that can bring up emotion. And sometimes we need patience to endure the memory as it crops up in our visions. And then to take a moment to be with it and look at it and feel it and chew on it as an adult, where we are right now, knowing what we know right now. And when we have visions that are painful, that are disconcerting, that feel harmful, when we are not ready, when they are unwelcome, we can say, "Not now. Whoever is bringing this vision to me, go away. I am not prepared. I do not wish to have." Many years ago, I learned that when I witnessed on my inner screen an airplane plummet from the sky. I actually found myself in the cockpit of an airplane going down. And then in the vision, I saw myself outside the wreckage of the airplane. I wrote it down, every detail that I had about it. And the very next day, there it was in the news. It was a foreign airliner. It was dreadful. And I called up my spiritual director. I made an appointment with her. And we talked about that. I said, I really don't wish to see those things, to experience the agony, to experience the horror. And she said, well, maybe you need to pray that those kinds of visions no longer come to you. I said, there wasn't anything I could do to help those people. I don't know what their karmic path is, was, continues to be. I don't know that. There was nothing I could do to influence that. All I could do was experience it with them. I have enough on my own plate. And I made that prayer, and I no longer have those dreams. I no longer have those visions. If I cannot change it, if I'm not supposed to give voice to it, right? And Corey is saying, I've had so many visions throughout my life. Vision typically is hereditary. It runs in bloodlines. And Corey is my cousin, my mother's first cousin, my second cousin. So we share the same bloodline. The same is true. The other day, one of my king cousins put out a text message to all of us about a dream she had just had. And could somebody, please check on the source of her dream? It tends to run in bloodlines, right? It's part of ancestral stardust for many. Although many in bloodlines don't want to acknowledge it, don't want to talk about it. And so for some people, they're the first ones to give voice to the fact that they have visions. And then somebody else will say, well, I never wanted to say it because Grandma said we shouldn't talk about those things, but I've had visions. And someone else might say, well, Grandma didn't want to talk about it because Grandma always had visions herself. It's a conversation starter. Before long, there's a whole understanding that, oh my God, all the women in the family have visions? Well, not only the women, some of the men did too. So it is perfectly natural. Some people are born gifted athletes, gifted musicians, gifted artists. And in all of those cases, they have a choice in how they are going to utilize that gift. And maybe they find out that great-grandpa was quite a runner himself, or quite a painter himself. And maybe even though they have those gifts and talents, they decide they don't want to employ them. They don't want to utilize them. Yeah, it's great that I have that, but being a gifted athlete also means that there's injury sometimes involved. I don't want to injure myself. Well, there are aspects of that for those of us with vision. Something operates the ability to receive that, and that would be our brain, right? Those wonderful synapses of electricity inside our brain. Well, I'd like to be a painter, but sometimes painters end up blah, blah, blah. Just food for thought. We all have gifts and talents. How do we use them? Some are just more talked about than others, right? Are we a great running athlete and do we help others with that gift and talent? Are we using it in a good way, or do we become a drug runner, right? Do we actually run with drugs? Are we a mule? How do we operate out of our gift and our talent, whatever that happens to be? That's the question. And how do we hone that gift and that talent? How do we express it? How do we use it correctly? Well, we've got a lot of classes coming up at the School of Sacred Studies. Check it out, schoolofsacredstudies.com. Check out what's happening in the year 2020. This year is not quite over yet. My class this weekend really does wrap it up because winter has arrived. But check it out, what we've got going to help you learn more about, to express more accurately, more lovingly, more kindly to yourself the gifts that you've been given. Well, everybody, it's way past the end of the show time, but it's a great conversation, and I thank you all for joining me in the chat room. Thank you for following me on Spreaker and YouTube and iHeartRadio and all of those good things. It means a lot to me. It keeps me excited about continuing to do my work so that I can hopefully help keep you excited about doing your work, whatever that is, with your gifts and talents. And in that vein, everyone, thank you for shining your light as you do. Get out there, live your life, shine your light. Embrace those, as Stevie Nicks says, those crystal visions. Embrace it. Work with it. Walk with it. Be with it. Blessings be, everybody. Have a beautiful day.